You're listening to Life of the Record, classic albums told by the people who made them. My name is Dan Nordheim. Hey, this is Dan Nordheim, host of Life of the Record. I wanted to let you know about a great new product from DistroKid called Direct. DistroKid launched Direct as a direct-to-fan platform that allows artists to sell their own merch. With Direct, artists have the chance to create a merch store in minutes with no upfront costs. All of the printing, shipping, and support is handled by Direct, so artists won't get bogged down with the logistics of having to ship and store merch. And just like distribution, DistroKid never takes a cut, so artists get to keep 100% of their earnings. To get started, go to distrokid.com/direct and select the types of products you want to sell, such as mugs, shirts, totes, and more. You can then choose your album artwork and the prices you'd like to sell your merch for. Lastly, connect your PayPal account so you can start receiving the money from your sales. To get your store set up today, go to distrokid.com/direct. Bat for Lashes formed in 2006 as the musical alias for Natasha Khan. She had grown up in Hertfordshire, England, and studied art at the University of Brighton. After graduating, she taught as a schoolteacher while writing songs and performing as Bat for Lashes. Her manager, Dick Odell, got her a publishing deal and connected her with producer David Kosten to work on some demos. The first Bat for Lashes single, The Wizard, was released on her own label in early 2006. After signing with Echo, Khan and Kosten began working on a full-length album together. Fur and Gold was eventually released in 2006. In this episode, for the 20th anniversary, Natasha Khan and David Kosten reflect on how the album came together. This is the making of Fur and Gold.
Hi, I'm Natasha Khan, also known as Bat for Lashes, and today we are talking about my first album and the making of the record Fur and Gold. It was method, and it kind of sounds really pretentious when you talk about it, separated from being in the studio. But I took it on as a role that I had to inhabit, and personally I felt like I was in this sort of dreamlike seance space in terms of holding the vision in my mind, and I was extremely clear and probably could be quite abrupt and particular about what I liked and didn't like. And because I was fiercely focused on this idea and this place that I wanted the record to come from. And so it was this strange kind of like subconscious dream-like liminal space that we were inhabiting, whilst also being really silly and having a laugh and all the studio, banter and all that, which keeps you sane because it is a crazy space to be in. And this sort of like dreamlike space was counteracted with very practical setups and things we had to do to achieve this sound. And like going out into the woods, it was all because I meant it, like I felt it. And when I was singing those words, I wanted it to be fucking perfect.
Woken in the night by mystic golden light, my head soaked in river water.
So I guess I was like 26 or 27 years old. I had been a preschool teacher and I came out of art school a few years prior to that. And when I left University in Brighton, I'd done music with visual art. So I kind of started writing the songs that were to be some of the songs that appeared on the album, some Bat for Lashes tracks. And I'd been playing live gigs in Brighton and around the area, some in Paris, some in London, trying to kind of hone my craft. And luckily, my first manager, Dick O'Dell, who I was with for 7 years, he found me one night, or sort of approached me and helped me get my first publishing deal. So, we got the publishing deal and we started looking at how to record the demos that I had. And I'd gone to San Francisco and done a second round of songwriting to complete the album. And then I came home with these 10 or 11 tracks. And then we were ready to start recording sessions. So yeah, that was the lead up to meeting David.
Hi, I'm David Kosten, and I am Natasha's co-producer on Fur and Gold. My route into this was completely not conventional, in the sense that I was drafted in initially by the boss of the publishing company to see if I had an interest in co-writing with Natasha.
Really? I don't even know that. I didn't even know that.
So
they're always after a bloody co-write.
So this seemed to be, I don't quite know exactly what their thoughts were on what they thought Natasha was going to be or wanted to be, or what they thought Natasha ought to be, or anything like that. But for some reason, I was at a point in my life where I think I'd produced 3 or 4 artists, not particularly successfully, but I'd released my own music as an artist. And they thought that I was prime material to get on with Natasha and help things along on a songwriting front. And it became clear within about 3 seconds of meeting Natasha that there was no fucking way that was happening. And she wasn't remotely interested in co-writing, I think probably with anyone. But when I was listening to those demos that the publisher played me, it didn't make any sense anyway. I could hear instantly that there was a whole record there. It might not have been the jazz hands pop record that maybe somebody might have thought at some point Natasha ought to be making, a sort of, something intensely commercial. But it sounded to me like a brilliant record. And like I say, Natasha had absolutely zero interest in me marching in and saying, let's make a pop record of some sort, because I don't know what else you would do. What's the point in co-writing when there's already a very cool record waiting to be made? The thing that wasn't there was like a sort of 4 on the floor banger. I didn't get it, and it made sense that Natasha had no interest at all in that. So then we just ended up with, I had no value or use to this project whatsoever, unless it was I suppose on a production level. And even that, I think, was like a kind of, well, why don't we just do like a little tester?
Yeah. I remember coming into your tiny studio with, I think we tried out 3 tracks or something. And I mean, this was all of this lead up was completely unbeknownst to me. I just thought I was going in to meet a producer. And I don't even remember.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Are you serious? You didn't know about that bit? That's mad that we didn't discuss it at all. Maybe your beloved manager.
No, I think he was probably protecting me, because I would have got cross.
Hit the roof. Yeah. So as will become clear, there are a number of instances of Natasha becoming quite cross, and we can
Dump
tick these off one at a time as we. This is my opportunity
Oh my God.
Yeah.
He always gets me in trouble. He delights in it. Look at that chuckle.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd gone in and I'm sure they probably got me to meet other producers, but I just have no recollection, because I remember meeting David and thinking,
okay, no. This is bullshit.
Why?
Because the CD that you made for me, the demo CD that Natasha printed that said demos for David, was a CDR with a stick-on sleeve, and when I picked it off, it said demos for James Ford on it.
That was not for that record. That must have been Two Sons, no?
No, it was for that record.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Well, I never met him.
Yeah.
I never met him, because Although David's trying to throw me under the bus, it was because I met David and decided I wanted to work with him. But thanks.
But tell you one thing we did do. We went to the place we made the album to do the demos, which was crazy, amazing to be able to go and do.
Right, yeah.
We did all 4 of those songs. So that was the idea. We did 4 songs in 4 days as the demos to see if we were going to kill each other.
At Jacobs.
And at this studio in the countryside, called Jacobs. And all 4 of those songs made it onto the album pretty much exactly as the demos. I don't think, apart from a couple of little mix tweaks, that was it. They're the demos. So I guess we got on, and James Ford had his CD
didn't ever
revoked.
Get to meet me.
Yeah.
Didn't have the pleasure.
Yeah.
Obviously, the original demos were all done at home by me, with Abby Fry on viola and Caroline Weeks adding some backing vocals, guitars, and, we were kind of, as a group of girls in the sort of initial band, we were playing out those songs for a while before I even got the deal. So, and at home I'd done a load of kind of preemptive demos which didn't make it onto the album, like songs called Howl, Rosie, Carrie, Blood Red Shoes, like these kind of mini CDs that I was making to sell at shows. And then, I guess when I remember writing What's a Girl to Do on my bedroom floor. Like, I used a little QI70 and I had Logic and some plugins, and I remember bashing a boot on my desk and using hand claps and things. So I had kind of, sonically, I had definitely thought about the world and tried to do it in my own very lo-fi way. And I think, David, you must have heard those early demos, because I don't know whether we did any from scratch in Jacobs, but I think most of them had been, like the string parts and things, we'd already sort of written with Abby and stuff.
Yeah, I think there were lots of sort of revelatory things for me in working with Natasha, where there were a lot of firsts. And one was, here we had music where all the parts pretty much had been worked out in advance and every single one was perfect. There was nothing to do, really, in terms of there being parts where it just didn't seem like it helped the track at all. It was all really good. And although I think we did do some of those tracks from scratch at Jacobs, those demos, there were lots of really good demos that I was played, even in that very first meeting before meeting Natasha, when I was in the office of the publisher. I remember being played a demo of I Saw a Light, which essentially was the same thing. It didn't change that much. It didn't need to, it was done as a song, and as a concept, it was there. And all we really did together was take it from sounding a bit like a demo to something that sounded like a finished piece. It must have helped hugely that so many of these songs had parts that had been fleshed out with other musicians and practiced live and so played out live, because I'd come off the back of working with bands, doing 2 or 3 band recordings and a couple of albums with solo singers, and every single part on those records was worked out in the studio. And it was really hard. It was agonizingly hard sometimes. And yet here was a record where the songs were great, all the parts were great, and you had an artist who had a vision for every single component of this work.
I've been dressed in a coat of armor. They caught a horse out of the woodland. Take her there through the desert shores. Listen to me, this is yours to wear. You're the chosen one, there's no turning back now.
I remember, the demo-itis kind of attachment to some really terrible MIDI sounds that I made bass lines out of and stuff. And I think there was a compromise that we sort of we started to develop an understanding that I wanted the tacky shit sounds, but David quite cleverly explained to me that if we added like a bass underneath the shit bass that I liked with nice subs and kind of a nice rounded sound, that would be kind of disguised, but it just gave this bottom end and like three-dimensionality to the parts. And so quite a lot of it was also combinations of quite hi-fi beautiful sounds or nice, analog sounds combined with quite sort of thin, small electronic sounds. And we sort of quite quickly started to develop this really nice world that was combining archaic sounding things with really modern things and tacky things with really beautiful things. And the effects we used the space echo quite early on, and we got very attached to that as like a character of the story of this album. And the an upright piano just had, we'd put things through old amps, and just we very sort of like quickly realized we had quite similar taste in terms of sonics that had a story behind them and things that meshed together to create a third unheard of thing, like sounds that started to create a world of their own. And that was really exciting to have someone on my side that was a technician and an engineer and a producer, somebody that understood sculpting sound, because I could see it and explain it in terms of weather and colours and scenes and characters. And with David, I started, I had done music production at school, but I think my confidence started to build in terms of like discussing how to EQ and pan things and what kinds of reverbs did we want to, a quick delay on this thing. And I just sort of watched him at work and described things and watched how he did them. And that was a really nice blossoming kind of, language that we started quite early.
Yeah, I think that's very key to the whole thing having worked, isn't it? That there was a sort of shared language, and I felt the freedom to try and bring the things that I'd learned doing my own thing and working with other artists. And I brought them in, and I understood. I learned that, God, I learned so much making this record. I learned that not everything you bring is going to make it, and even some things that you think are brilliant are not going to make it. And it's not even necessarily because they're not quite good ideas, they just don't fit what the
There's
artist.
So much space.
Yeah,
we wanted space on the record.
And the artist doesn't necessarily feel that is appropriate to the lyric of the music. And this was there was a new way of working for me that was based on feel and color almost of, I want this to feel like X, I want this to feel like a forest. I want this to feel like kids being naughty underneath a duvet. It was all about descriptions of magical sounds, smells, colors, feelings. And that was how the music was described to me. And then it was me translating that into, I think that probably means that we should try this. And so we tried lots of things, and lots of them made the cut. Lots of the kind of brave, silly ideas actually worked. And we had a little group of whichever studio we were at, sort of an assistant or a couple of people that were helping us, sort of running around with microphone plugging in and positioning and all that sort of stuff. And we just sort of came up with ridiculous ideas, tried them. Oh, that worked. On to the next. And suddenly this thing sort of began to build and sort of feel like it was a unified sound. It was hard work, but it didn't feel like it was a grind or anything other than, really enjoyable doing it. Even if we had the odd row. It's good having a row.
I had created this little universe in my mind, and then I was, I entrusted David to kind of help me make it technicolor and like panoramic. I kind of wanted it to feel like the inside of a Steven Spielberg film, and also having been at university, we'd learned about quite strange sort of avant-garde recording techniques, and he was so up, we discussed recording outside. I really wanted to record outside, and for Horse and I, David helped to set up this 40-foot lead or whatever, and I think I walked out into the forest and you can hear raindrops when you isolate the vocal and twigs cracking, and And then I did like some theremin sort of operatic singing, like in the woods. And then, you know, we set up microphones in the garden where Caroline and I ran up and down screaming and whooping and shouting and like just being really childlike. And that, you know, we put that on the end of the bat's mouth, the sort of jubilant crescendo at the end of the song. And like David said, you know, cuddled up under comforters and sang really quiet backing vocals. It felt like we were like the house itself, Jacob's, it had sort of like loft beamed rooms and it felt quite Peter Pan-ish, and I don't know, there's something very English countryside magical about it. And I just, you know, I loved the room I was staying in. There was a fireplace and we had a lovely girl that cooked food for us and we all ate dinner together, and then we'd just be like, right, what's next? And I just remember feeling like it was this little treasure chest, like this kid's chest that we would open up for each song and just think about the most fun, magical, weird and wonderful way we could capture the spirit of that song. I'm writing a book at the moment about my whole life, but this process, particularly at this moment, I'm doing the Fur and Gold days, and I just I look back on it so fondly because my dissertation was the artist's preoccupation with childhood, and I delved quite deeply into the darkness of childhood, the trauma of childhood, the magic and the kind of dreams and nightmares and the awe of childhood. And all of that was kind of like concentrated down into this gang of girls and David and a couple of engineers, you know, like, I don't know, I felt like all these magical childlike people were gathering together and contributing to this album. Yeah.
The amount of estrogen that was going on. I think I was, because our assistant in the studio was a girl as well, wasn't she?
And I liked that. I wanted women all around me, even though it wasn't that music industry at the time. I was like, this is
just
awesome.
Had some grumpy guy in the control room sort of complaining about something or other. I'm not sure Natasha realizes quite how unusual what we were doing was, when I guess compared to the most of the other records that I'd made up till then and since, that are very fraught and often are very difficult, and there's a lot of
overthinking
and emotional harm caused in trying to sort of birth these things. And actually, because so much of the work had already been done, that the writing work was all in place, including, like I said, all these kind of beautiful musical parts, violin parts and guitar parts, and so much, at least half of it was written before, probably 2/3 was written before we even got to the studio, of all these elements that were needed. And here we were in this sort of 18th century country manor with a big garden and somebody to cook for us. And we had, I don't know how long we had. I think it was a couple of months that we were there. And this is just ridiculous to be offered to do this with music that is this creative and not unconcerned with trying to be chart friendly. It was just make it really good and interesting and unique and push as far as one could to deliver, you know, what the lyrics and the songs were asking for. And it was so unique. And one thing as well, Natasha was talking about, you know, I wanted it to feel like, or I wanted it to feel like we were recording outside, or feel like, you know, we were in a particular place. And it was like the sort of film equivalent of, sort of VFX equivalent of using practical effects in a way. It was like, I would really love to have the sound of the forest. Well, hang on. We're literally next door to a woodland area. 40 feet, Mike. It was not. Oh. That was 400 feet.
Oh, was it?
This was literally hundreds of feet of cable. Took us an hour or more connecting every single cable in the studio, including next door's studio, where we stole all their mic cables, to go from the control room all the way out the house, round the back of the house, and position the mic somewhere where it wasn't going to get ruined. Sort of vintage Neumann classic mics that if the owner had been there, they would have
had a heart attack.
had a total heart attack to see their sort of prized possession going into the like a sort of slightly
Damp English woodland.
damp English woodland. Yeah. So all these things, it was kind of fun. Oh, I want it to feel like in a bed with my friends being, sort of hiding. Okay, let's run the cable from the control room up to the bedrooms. I mean, some of this was just to get Natasha off my back. Like, fuck's sake, what the hell how am I going to do that one? Well, let's actually just do the thing that Natasha wants. And this was a new concept to me as a producer, just doing what the artist wanted to do. It's like, let's just do that then. And every time it worked. And I'd never done, well, this needs a weather sound. Okay, let's record the weather. Let's find a sound of the weather. And it fucking worked.
A banquet for the shadows, horse and I, we're dancers in the dark. Came upon her headdress, it was gilded, dark and golden. The children sang, I was so afraid, I took it to my head and prayed.
Horse and I came from a dream. So I dreamt that a horse came to my window and I kind of lifted up my sash window. I was on like the third floor, but he was there and I got on his back, and it references back to my teenage years when I looked after a horse for a couple of years after this sort of family tragedy. And I rode bareback in the woods around in Hertfordshire where I grew up. Most nights after school, and I'd go before school to muck out the horse and feed him, and I sort of developed this relationship. And on those rides alone, I listened to many albums and educated myself at the age of 12 or whatever I was in lots of albums that my godfather Danny Thompson had dropped over. So Nick Drake and Kate Bush and Neil Young and The Cure I was really into. And so it made sense that it was the first song on the record. It's kind of a manifesto or like an initiation or a ritual, a rite of passage song about being chosen to go on this horse and ride into a forest where you're crowned and told that you're the chosen one and you've got to make this thing. And so I got up in the morning after this dream and I had a harpsichord sound on my keyboard and just sort of wrote this really rhythmic harpsichord part, and then the words came out really quickly. And I remember inviting Abby around and we kind of talked about I think I'd put like a MIDI bass pluck, doom, 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 doom underneath it. And then she layered that up with her viola, and we've kind of arranged the string part over the top, and then it was done, But there was something about that song that it had to come first, like once we had made all the songs, it naturally was an opener. Yeah, the galloping, I think David and I I don't remember who played that snare drum part, but Lizzie in the band had been playing like a snare drum kind of thing over the top, but I think we got someone who could properly play it to do that. And yeah, there's sort of a heartbeat and a gallop, which is obviously related to the horse theme, and this kind of like, Knights of the Round Table, like there's this kind of knightly harpsichordy medieval aspect. Yeah, and I think when David and I did it, we did do the long lead out into the forest, and all these lovely kind of atmospheric sounds open up the whole album before the song even starts. You hear all the wind and the rain and all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that much about the making of this particular track, but there's key things. There's sounds and pointers on that song that travel across the whole record, like opening with those weather sounds. That was a fundamental idea that became a thing on this record, was using natural sounds and found sounds and weather noises and incorporating those into a music track in quite a often very clear, sort of unsubtle way in terms of how prominent those things were. The other thing that I remember very well was there's a sound that sounds exactly like a theremin fairly early on in that song. And I remember watching Natasha sing that sound. That sound is not a theremin, it is Natasha Khan in full theremin singing mode, and being absolutely astounded. Because one of the great things about being a producer is when you watch somebody doing a vocal pass or recording something, and it's that good that you know that that particular moment that you've just witnessed is going to be on a record, and that's going to be the take. And also knowing instinctively that this is going to be a record that a lot of people are going to like. And I remember that particular moment being one of those where I think it took one go or one or two goes. There was no effort whatsoever to get that. It was just, I think we wanted a theremin. That was the thing. We were trying to create that. That melody, and we didn't know how to do it. We didn't have anyone there. So I think one of us just said, you do it, or I'll do it. And in you went, and we just bunged a bit of my sort of go-to echo box on it, and that's it. And it was such a great moment. Like, we can move really fast by doing nearly all of this ourselves. We can play, between the two of us, we can play lots of stuff. We've got brilliant people that already know all their bits. We can just motor through, and there's no kind of waste here. We're just doing good things. And if the idea doesn't click, that's fine. We've got other ideas. We'll move on. We'll do that. So yeah, having Natasha nail the theremin in one go, pretty much, and it sounded that good and that kind of magical and sort of evocative. Yeah, that was important. No one would necessarily know what goes into making a record like that, but it's complicated and there's a lot of moving parts. The reason it's so damn good is that the artist drove a freaking hard bargain. That's why it's so good. There was no plan B. It had to be this. It's my first album. I've waited a long time to make this record. I know what this record should sound like. I don't necessarily know exactly how to make every element of this, but that's what you're meant to be here to help me do and fulfill this really pretty complete vision. And we're talking about somebody that showed up to the first meeting with a really thick book to explain how this album was going to be. That's where it was at. It was open the first page, and you had visual references, you had sonic references, you had James Ford. I mean, my CDR. You had a lot of reference material to listen to. I love the way this vocal sounds. Lots of drawing, but there was a lot of practical help. Things to try and draw, because you tried things out and hadn't necessarily got exactly what you needed. So you wanted to cover all bases, make sure there was no room for error. Yeah. And within that, then once the trust was, and it took a little while to get Natasha's trust, and you're sort of constantly re-earning it. But once it was there, and you're firing on all cylinders, and you're coming up with an idea. Yes, let's do that. Let's try this. Yes, David, I like that one out of your 74 ideas. Let's try that.
I was very suspicious of anything that sounded trip hop, and I remember him trying to put across some sort of Massive Attack-y style ideas, which I had loved Massive Attack, and at that point in time, though, it was very uncool for me to like them, and that now I love them again. But we had huge rows.
This was the worst insult you could possibly.
Yeah, we had big rows, and I did feel initially that I was pushing him and testing him a lot, because I was like, I'm not going to give this gig to any old so-and-so. Like, I need to know that you understand what I want to do and that you get what I'm saying. And if he suggested something that was really out of my remit, I would feel like personally offended, but he didn't get it. It was so important to me. And I was probably quite tough at times, but yeah, that was the only way.
At the time, it might seem difficult and painful, or kind of just like hard grind occasionally to sort of get through the problems. But that's, like I say, the problems is where the magic is, because you overcome them. And once you've done that, you look at each other and go, that worked. We move on to the next thing to fix. And nothing makes it onto the record that wasn't liked or loved even. There's nothing on any of those records that didn't pass the test. So it's all stuff that had been given the thumbs up by the artist and sort of felt like that's working. So it became clear that even if there was a row, it was just because we both wanted it to be really good. There was no ego particularly. It was just, this has to be really good. So how are we going to do that then?
The trophy that I made for us in fur and gold got into the wrong pair of hands, and truth was sold.
Gosh, Trophy. I mean, the main thing I remember about Trophy was that we'd been playing it live quite a bit, and it had this really low MIDI bass, dun, 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 you know, and it's just that, a beat, vocal, and then strings that come in and out, which was kind of this similar palette to a lot of the songs. And but I'd asked Josh T. Pearson from Lift to Experience to come in, and he rocked up in his cowboy hat and rhinestones and like pointy boots and like mad blue eyes and a wizened beard, and, you know, came in and just, I really loved his voice and I loved his guitar playing. But he only came for like a day or two, I think, and he put down an amazing guitar part on Trophy, like really kind of unhinged and, you know, kind of screaming guitar, and then added to those, heaven is a feeling I get, such a low backing vocal that I could barely reach. And so we had the idea of getting him to add his like Texan drawl singing, preacher man kind of singing to that. And it was really nice because the album, it was really nice to have a male voice in certain parts. Like he also sang on Seal Jubilee, and just having that kind of counterpart voice, because it's such a feminine sounding record, I think. But the darker songs, I really enjoyed having, you know, more grungy guitars and stuff. I didn't want it to be slick guitar. Having come from like loving Nirvana and Sonic Youth and stuff, he sort of brought a bit of that careening off the road kind of feeling, and he felt like that as a person as well, a bit unhinged but lovely. And I kind of enjoyed his energy on the record. It was quite different to anything else other people were contributing, don't you think, David?
I mean, for somebody turning up, probably, I think it was less than 2 days he was there, you know, a day and a half of studio time maybe. He made a big impact, and he brought a sort of an edge to things, but he made us try even harder, because he bowled up with a sort of confidence in his coolness. There was just something, there was a vibe about him that was a little intimidating, and we wanted to look good, you know, and make best use of what he could bring.
They bought it for oh so much less than it was worth, and every man that touched it found a heaven on earth. Heaven is the feeling I get in your arms. Heaven is the feeling I get in your arms. Heaven is the feeling I get in your arms. Heaven is the feeling I get in your arms.
There were lots of things about those opening two songs that felt like we were essentially capturing the live set. I remember going to see Natasha play in Brighton way before we made the record, and those two really stood out, Horse and I and Trophy. And essentially what you're hearing there is not a million miles from what I heard at the gig, but things like Josh bringing that guitar and you can hear the metallic strings, and you can hear this gravel and the weather noises on Horse and I. All these elements elevated it from being essentially like what you get if a band plays live and then just tracks a live record. It became something much more than that as soon as we added these amazing sort of extra musicians and sounds. And there was lots of luck as well. I'd just bought an incredible old vintage guitar amp. Yeah, I bought an amazing 1961 Selmer guitar amp.
Oh, yeah.
I think a couple of weeks before we began the record. And it was an amazing find. And I still got it. I was using it today in the studio. And it's just the most incredible atmosphere machine. And that one guitar amp, the sound of that amp.
Over everything.
So much percussion sounds through it, vocals through it, not just guitars or pianos through it. It was a push button machine called a selector tone, and you push a button and it gives you a very specific sound that worked for some things and not others. And it really, it brought an enormous amount.
The queens and the court jesters clapped, adored. Their hearts swelled to overdrive. Mercy soared. Mercy this and mercy that, let justice prevail. But I just want my trophy back, it's not for sale. Heaven is the feeling I get in your arms. Heaven is the feeling I get in your arms.
I think I had a very healthy suspicion of the record industry and kind of selling my soul to the devil at the crossroads, like this feeling of monetizing something that I had inherently carried inside of myself since I was a little girl. And so the lyrics that, the trophy that I made for us in fur and gold got into the wrong pair of hands and truth was sold. It's about something becoming a commodity that to me was so precious. And it's about, when I first moved into the record industry and became professional and signed my deal, I really struggled with this idea of being commercial, of selling out, of taking money for like my wares, and I felt that I was so sensitive about it. I didn't want anything to be taken. I didn't want to upset the gods, like there was some feeling. And creatures of mercy, shoot them down and set me free. Like, what is it? Like the queens and the court jesters clapped, adored. It's all like this sort of the emperor's clothes, like this idea that you go on stage and everyone's just adoring it and they want it and they want you, and it's kind of vampiric and so that song is just like a little warning to myself about what I was getting into, I suppose.
I wonder how we captured that sort of naivety as well. That there's a childlike quality to all this stuff. Just thinking about you talking about the kings and queens, and there's a sort of clapping sound through it, and there's a sort of nursery rhyme quality and a slight sort of grim fairy tale quality to all these songs. And I know we were trying to capture that, but I don't feel like we agonized over how to actually do it.
Well, I do think it was inherent. It was already there, I feel like, for songs like that, because I'd been listening a lot to the Langley School's music project, like this 70s album of little kids singing all like David Bowie songs and stuff. And I'd been reading kind of Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I'd been, I was kind of, it's really hard to describe like what particular sound made it feel fairy tale, because it was kind of like in the blood of everything. And so every choice we made, even though we didn't necessarily talk about that we didn't say we wanted that, but it was just that whatever sonically sounded right had this naive sort of like not overthought and sort of quite charming.
There's an innocence
dark,
to it. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel like a particularly knowing record or a knowing sound. It feels like it's almost like a discovery that children have made, like a sort of picnic at Hanging Rock kind of discovery record.
And even the claps on that, they weren't we didn't sync them up perfectly and put them through, like chop them up and all of that. All the claps were kind of like just me layering claps over the top of each other, and sometimes they're out of time and they're further away or closer, and it kind of gives this, not shambolic, but there's a
looseness to it.
Yeah.
I've never been obsessed with making things perfectly in time. that seemed like an obvious way to sort of mess this up, would be to
Clean it up.
edit everything. Just because you can, we didn't edit everything into sort of perfection at all on this record. The opposite, really, sort of leaving things as sort of as unkempt and sort of au naturel as you could, really.
So I had like the first bunch of demos. So from the gigs David's talking about, there were those early, more sort of fairy tale-ish songs. And then I met Devendra Banhart and decided to go to San Francisco and jump on his tour bus and sing backup for him from San Francisco to LA, like all down the West Coast, like Pacific Highway coast. And there was a man on the bus called Tahiti who I think he'd just broken up with his partner, and it was like a terrible fallout. And all I remember about him was that had these beautiful blue eyes, but he often would wear very dark sunglasses, and you just see tears like coming down from underneath his sunglasses while we were sitting on the tour bus, and all these kind of redwoods and amazing coastal views whizzing past the window, and just him looking out the window with these tears. And that song is about us being this kind of little band of vagabonds, like community saw the best in me, exchanging the common heart for the salt in the sea. Like it was just this kind of sea salt infused, sad atmosphere that he brought. And so, yeah, the whole song is literally the right hand of the piano just repeats over and over, and there's kind of these bass notes that change it. Nothing really happens musically. And that happened a lot on the songs in these records. There's not very much verse, chorus, verse. I don't think there is a middle A at all on the whole record. It was, I suppose, like my dad's Pakistani. I've been thinking about this while writing the book, but he played harmonium a lot as a kid, and Pakistani and Indian music focuses on drones. And also like my love of Debussy and these kind of like rolling classical pianists. There's something about songs like, What's a Girl to Do and Daniel and, all these sort of subsequent songs, they all just have like a loop that goes through, and then a bass line will come in and change it in the chorus. It kind of changes it to a place that you weren't expecting. And so I played the piano, and then Abby came in with her viola plucking kind of gypsy sounding parts that was syncopated and interplaying with my piano. And then it was just these low octave chords. Caroline brought that in when Abby and I played it to her, and she kind of tuned her autoharp to it, and then she just had these flourishes, and that was really nice, yeah. And yeah, it's just a song about that time.
Children of the sun on a highway of hope, the beauty of coming together in sorrow. Tahiti, we don't got no name. Tahiti, we don't got no hope.
There's a crucial thing that we've not talked about yet, which Natasha can sort of cover her ears over, which is the melodies on this record are so damn good. And Tahiti, I think that might be my favourite, because the melody is just outrageously beautiful, right? It's so pretty. And that chorus with that lyric is so heartbreaking, but it's just the melody, one after the other. We talk about we're 3 songs in, and it doesn't let up. Every single song I think we let some go maybe from the record that didn't feel like they were part of the package. But there's not one that doesn't have a melody of this sort of quality. And I pushed Natasha really hard. We always did this, and that's a key part of it, on the singing, to get the right vocal and work really long and hard to generate the right vocal performance is there. But sometimes it's just really easy. So Tahiti, that's a live recording. That whole music track
Oh yeah,
was
we
done in
recorded it all
one go.
together.
We recorded the vocal later, but all of that music, it took a little bit of setting up, but it's all done in one room.
The
With
auto
the
harp,
grand
the
piano.
viola and the piano, yeah.
Yeah, and I was in the room too while they were doing it, sort of trying to hold a microphone. I think I had a mic that we moved from
Over
one
the
person to
alto
another
harp.
over the alto harp, and then shifted to the plucking. It was it's quite basics of. Although we were in a really amazing place, just because we wanted to move quickly, I might have a rage at it taking too long to set up 4 microphones. Well, we don't need 4 mics. Let's just have 2, and I'll hold one and I'll point it at the other, the next thing, because it means we can record right now and just get it done. But I do remember recording that one. I think we did 2 or 3 takes, and it was after setting it up, and it was just ready to do the vocal. And then maybe I'm sure we spent
we did
some
the
time.
BVs with the girls.
Yeah, we probably spent a lot of time getting the right setup to get the vocals right and get enough takes to be able to choose the best ones. But yeah, as recording speed goes, Tahiti was probably the easiest one of all to actually capture. And my favourite. I probably did the least work on that one and had the least input. But I really love that one. It's so gorgeous.
Tahiti, we don't got no name. Tahiti, we don't got no home. Tahiti, we don't got no money. Tahiti, we don't got no honey.
What's a Girl to Do was kind of an accident. I'd sat down on my Yamaha QI70, which was my writing tool for most of the demos of the first 2 albums, or the kind of like beaty ones, I suppose. But it had like a page where you can do like 4 bars and then it would loop. And so I went in with my harpsichord sound, and I'd fucked up and I hadn't put 1/4. It was on 1/1. And so I went to play some like do 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 whatever I was going to do, and it just went do 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 do, and it was looping on this really short 1 loop, and I was like, oh my god, actually.
We walked arm in arm, but I didn't feel his touch. The desire I'd first tried to hide, that tingling inside, was gone.
And I put a little like beat or and then the bass line doom 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 under that. And suddenly it was just like, this is awesome. And I'd been listening to the Shangri-Las, Walking in the Sand, and like Kim Gordon's, Kiss Me in the Shadow of a Doubt, like, and there was just something so like dark about those girl group songs, and I knew that this was going to be a dark kind of pop song about breaking up with someone, and my instinct was just to talk about it because I loved how the Shangri-Las had done that, and it had that kind of 50s motorbike tragic accident off a cliff kind of feeling. And then I remember David saying that I sounded like Jenny Agutter from the Railway Children. I was like so happy about that. She's this really lovely English actress from the 60s, and her voice is so well-to-do and kind of husky. And listening back to it, I do sound quite posh and nicely spoken, which is sort of funny because it's such a dark song.
And when he asked me, do you still love me? I had to look away. I didn't want to tell him,
and then for the chorus, I added that bass line. I was just like, it really needs like a sung chorus that you can sing into your hairbrush in the mirror, you know, like thinking of Karen Carpenter and these sorts of things. And that aha backing vocal is just hammy, like on purpose. I was sort of making a bit of a joke, and part of me was like, I loved it, but I also was a bit embarrassed about having written something so, to me, so poppy. And we often came up against that, David and I. Like, I didn't want something to have poppy beats on it, or I didn't want it to have a cymbal crash at the beginning of the chorus, because that's like embarrassing, or, you know, I was reluctant in many ways to push the pop end of my songwriting, but that one just, you couldn't deny it, and so we had to give it, you know, the treatment it deserved in the end.
It's quite a quirky pop song, isn't it? But it's got the elements that give you that longevity and that instant quality. That sort of hook is there from the very, very first. That harpsichord sound is an amazing hook, and so is the "Be My Baby" drum thing. Yeah, that's a hook in itself. You know, from the get-go. That I remember recording that.
Me
that was
too,
three of
yeah.
us. I can't remember which. I think maybe I was tambourine. I'm not
I
sure.
think I
But there
was, I was tambourine, I
Were
think.
you? Were you bass? Oh, were you tambourine?
I love
maybe
tambourine
I was
and
the big bass
maracas.
drum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dum.
But there were three of us doing that. It was like a snare, and it was all just on one mic in this very shiny wooden room. And my really regrettably primitive miking technique, where I just bung everything through the same sort of very sort of overloaded compressed chain. But that's the sound. That is that sort of classic. I'm like the sort of pound shop version of Phil Spector. That was the sort of, the sort of Kensal Rise Phil Spector with my sort of compressed.
We also put kind of 808 beats, and, you know, like the actual beat is kind of just old hip hop samples.
Yeah.
So that was quite nice to mix these sort of 50s drums with hip hop samples, and it's a funny mishmash, isn't it, of stuff, but it worked.
When your dreams are a train to a train wreck town, then I ask you now, what's it got to do? What's it got to do? Ha ha, what's it got to do? Ha ha, what's it got to do? Ha ha.
I love all those sort of backing vocals. They're so hilariously dramatic and
Melodrama.
clearly a pure melodrama. And there was a sort of knowing element and sort of a playful element to this. And you see that in the video too, which you did so well with Dougal, directing this sort of classic video on the bikes with all the sort of furry animals and stuff. It was very funny, but also just weird. It wasn't necessarily a conscious thing, but you ended up with this sort of strange, magical, playful record. It had all these sort of very cool elements that gelled without. It didn't feel like it was trying hard at all. It just felt very natural. And that one was one of the later ones I think we recorded, but it really was, let's go and record the drums. Oh, he set the volume too high on the mic, but fucking hell, it sounds amazing. That boom, 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 with a huge original plate reverb. Yeah. They had a real plate in, and it added that authenticity that is a really nice tangent to this very dry, sort of simple hip hop beat on a old drum machine. That song is great fun.
Don't like the things you don't say, leaving it for such a long, long time.
Because most of the parts were written, it was really nice, because the time that we probably would have spent on trying to write parts, which I didn't want to do anyway, was spent on the negative space and what the atmosphere of that would feel like. And I think recording The Room, like when we did Sad Eyes, I was like, I need whiskey because I was so sad when I wrote that song originally, and David got me like a big cup of whiskey at like 10 a.m. or something. I was like knocking back this whiskey, but the track itself is so sparse and it sounds so beautiful because I was getting into character. We were able to kind of take the narrative of each song, and I felt that the persona of that song would like take over me. And sonically, David would match that with like this lovely way of miking The Room and this like old upright. I don't think we chose the posh piano very much. Like we quite liked this old sort of sea shanty, creaky upright sound. And then, things like we'd go then and put it through a tiny telephone speakers and weird, using weird old mics. And so it became so much about the air around each song. And when I listen to the album, it does feel like it's a 3-dimensional space that you enter, and you can feel the sound of the room, you can feel the sound of the woods, you can feel Caroline and I running around, like panning left and right. There's so much space in there. It's such a real play. It exists as a place, and that was really fun.
Well, we were super lucky as well, because the place we recorded was just incredible. The rooms in that studio were essentially living rooms that were, 200 or 300 years old, but they had an ambience and a kind of reflective quality that had been honed. That studio had been running for 40 odd years, and Bowie had been there. The Smiths recorded all their records there. Radiohead.
Yeah.
And the roll call for that place was absolutely insane. But the actual audio quality that we were getting there, an old Neve desk, these amazing mics, this beautiful sounding rooms. If you wanted to, you could capture this sense of 3-dimensional space really well.
Why do you show me those sad, sad eyes each time you decide to pass on by? When you smile, those sad eyes look sadder and sadder still.
It's a pretty tough song. I have very rarely revisited that song. It was so kind of vulnerable. And I suppose songs like Laura that follow, like there's kind of these occasional piano ballads where I just lay my heart on the line, and I don't really know what else to do with it. So that song, I pretty much just played it on that upright piano, and then I think at the end David and I worked on the sad eyes, like the backing vocals all layered up, and David, you put it through some really nice tiny speaker or something that made it all the backing vocals really crackly and lo-fi and weird sounding, but that drew it into the rest of the record. But actually, to me, it's the one that sonically is the most different. It's one that's kind of like sits in its own space on the album, and I suppose it was in homage to people like Carole King and like those sort of 70s piano playing women that I'd loved as a little girl as well. And also Cat Power. I was really into Cat Power as a teenager, and I loved her covers record, and I really, and I love Lou Reed, and I don't know, there's just something about those sort of sad 70s sounding piano songs.
I can tell that you're lonely, but it seems now there's nothing you want me to do. So I won't try to take the sadness from those eyes that I love. Leave it open for someone else to.
Do you remember us playing this to your manager when we finished it?
No, what happened?
I remember he cried a lot, and I'd never seen this guy be as emotional as that. He was quite an emotional
He's very
man.
sweet, yeah, sensitive.
He's very sweet, but I remember him listening to that, and I turned round just thinking he might think it was quite good, and he was just bawling at the back of the studio. And he obviously had invested. I remember he thought that this might be the hit I remember him talking to me about this being the song. And I didn't think that was the case at all. I thought if there was anything that was going to succeed commercially, there were other better options, like What's a Girl to Do, maybe, or, certainly not that one. But I knew it had a certain power. But he'd invested a lot of thought into this, or hopes into this song. I was nervous that he wouldn't like it, but I remember him, me turning around, he was just sort of broken. A sort of broken manager at the back, sort of tears, Tahiti style tears rolling down his cheeks. Bless him. He was a key part of the making of this record, because he supported Natasha and me so much.
Fought off the opposition a lot. Yeah.
Even more than that, though, he gave us confidence, and whenever I would moan to him about how appalling Natasha was, he would sort of say something to get around that. And I'm quite sure Natasha had gone to him and said, "Oh my God, this guy, he makes everything so mid-90s. It's horrendous," And then so he was like a sort of
he was a
key
go-between
bit of the personnel. Yeah, he was a go-between. He was a supporter, and he was a huge fan as well. He was a cheerleader for everything we were doing, and every time he visited,
he was
so
enthusiastic and so supportive, and just our biggest fan.
I was used to managers. I'd worked on a few records, including some with some really well-known people, and I was used to managers turning up and it just being horrendous. And the artist would behave like a dick, trying to impress the manager, and the manager was trying to impress the artist. And it was never a good thing with a manager coming to the studio. And every time he came to the studio, it was a joy. And he would make us feel amazing, like we were 10 feet tall and that we were actually really good. And he would cry.
And it wasn't terrible.
He would... Yeah, he would say how amazing it was and what brilliant work we were doing, and oh my God, this is so great. He was just he fucking ruled during that process.
He was passionate about music, and I think that's why we worked together, because we just nerded out so much on Kate Bush, and we're just big fans of great musicians. And just a quick side note, this thing of him being kind of a mediator between David and I. David and I's relationship is pretty edgy at times, and it still is. There's kind of this there's a friction there, and I think we did need Dick to kind of help manage that at times, but that's why we worked so well together. There has to be that chemistry and that kind of push pull, and we're not easily impressed by each other, and and I think until after the fact, but I think there's just kind of that has set us in good stead, because, and I remember Dick saying this to me, and I think us saying to each other, anything that's worth making is not going to be easy. It was fucking hard. Sometimes it was so grueling and so emotional, and just we bashed heads on things and we couldn't agree on certain things, but because we both wanted it to be great.
Trying to hold it together, keep my love as light as a feather. Sad eyes, baby, it's been such a long time. Keep my heart breaking in the dark, come and spend the night. Sad eyes, I'm trying to hold it together. Keep my love as light as a feather.
The Wizard was about kind of cult leaders and sort of the hypnotic sexuality of certain types of men I'd met, and how I could see how that could translate into a Charles Manson vibe, having been in LA and visited these sort of culty 70s groupie parties and stuff. And The Wizard is all about, that hypnotic seance trance space that people get into when they're led by a wizard, someone who's got powers.
In the mess around, push me down into the ground, taste the hands that drink my body,
That's our first song. That's the first thing we ever did. That's our demo. Day one.
Yeah, I think that was really fun because the wizard we'd been playing live, and there's a maraca, like a maraca, there's this low bass line, there's weird kind of telephone sounds at the start, which were on my QI, like on the sound effects bank or whatever. And so we kind of did have these strange elements, but again, it was very, very sparse. And I remember taking it in to David, and just really nice touches, like, he added this grain and reverb to the maraca. We kind of both looked at each other as like, well, this sounds cool. And then, I think we re-recorded the bass with a really nice, or maybe someone came in and played the bass line, and we merged that with my MIDI bass. And that was kind of one of the first times we'd merged that bass lines and realised that we got a great bottom end as well as a really characterful tone doing that. And I really liked the way David captured my vocal. It felt really intimate and clear, and he sort of understood the mid to high EQ part of my voice. Like other people, have tried to compress that, or I don't know, they just don't understand where the kind of sweet spot of my vocal is. And I think David instinctively picked that out straight away.
But that song just is basically as you brought it. I don't think we did very much to that, apart from that sound that is so present there. That's that guitar amp. It's like just we're putting everything through that amp except the vocal. And I think this is a crucial thing on this record as well. That microphone we used for Natasha's, I think on pretty much every song. It's so expensive. When I signed to Warner's as an artist, I dumped half my advance on buying a couple of crazy good microphones, and one of those was the thing that we recorded all the vocals on, and I still use it. It's extraordinary how transparent and how you feel like
I'm whispering in your ear.
Yeah, you're so close. I mean, Natasha's literally singing all those vocals. It's not like a sort of conventional miking thing of giving a bit of distance. It's literally almost in the microphone and then sort of dealing with whatever difficulties that might present. But you kind of, the intimacy of all those vocals on this super, super it's a hand-built valve mic, but it was incredibly clear sounding. And that's a key part of the sound of the record, is these intensely lo-fi £20 eBay microphones recording live sounds that are being reamped through a really sort of crusty 1960s guitar speaker. Or that shaker sound is that amp with the reverb on it.
Valves.
And so many, all these sort of bits that are kind of sometimes on the edge of not working properly. But then in front of that, standing in front of it, you've got this vocal, and it adds that sort of juxtaposition element where the lyric and the vocal itself is pushed right in front of you, like you're having a performance, and everything else is sort of in 3 dimensions behind the singer, and the lyric is there for you to sort of just get instantly.
The wizard comes. The wizard comes. Wants to feel your shape and shooting. He will be our leader. Wants to feel your shape and shooting. He will be our leader.
I think Natasha had a thing for like sort of skinny, floppy-haired men in corduroy trousers. So my vision of the wizard was essentially one of these sort of LA hipster types in cords, sort of swanning around with a waistcoat, sort of commanding people to sleep with him. And Natasha and her sort of little group of teammates, sort of all female. Given that this was my first exposure to the whole sort of Bat for Lashes recording experience, because I'd gone from the meeting with Natasha and her manager straight into this crazy residential studio, and Natasha's team, the girls, just appeared out of nowhere, and suddenly I'm in Bat space with them sort of snickering about the rude bits in The Wizard.
a girl that wants to start. I'm thinking about having a couple of kids. Comb a brush around their heads in the morning. To be needed simply and with meaning.
So that was another one that came from a dream. I had a dream that had Priscilla Presley and Sian Marshall, who's Cat Power, in the dream, and they were talking to me about like wanting to get off the road and have a family and like settle down, and I got up and I had my auto harp, or the auto harp that Caroline had left, whatever key that was in. I just wrote it on my lap like half asleep. I mean, I think there was always like a push-pull for me of half of me was like wanted loads of kids and just to be happily married and kind of do the normal thing, but that was always grappling with this fire in my belly for going out into the world and being something different. So there's always been that push-pull, and I think every record has probably touched on some of that dilemma, internal dilemma.
She wants to live in a place that has a number and a name. For love as an anchor before the courage is gone. She really loves him, Priscilla. She really loves him, Priscilla. She really loves him, I tell you.
And I think the stamps and claps, that's the one where I'd use my boot on my desk. And I think we use my boots in the studio too to kind of hit onto a piece of wood and stuff. But the stamp and clap was really inspired by Gwen Stefani's Ain't No Hollaback Girl. I really was in love with that song at the time. And I'd also loved Alan Lomax and a lot of those kind of penitentiary blues songs. There was kind of that chain gang reference.
The only thing I would add, and this is a perfect one to mention it, is how open we both were to using demo parts. If something sounded good in a demo, it didn't need recording, and frankly I would probably both rather not put the effort into trying to make something that was already great better and then not do it. So all the things like the stamp clap stuff, that is all Natasha's original demos. I think maybe on that one we tried to add a little bit of something else to it, but it was never as good. So if it's good, it's good.
If it ain't
and
broke,
it doesn't matter
don't
where it
fix
comes
it.
from. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was one of many songs where there were elements that we left in from original demos that were just fine, that they sounded great.
The caves of our mouths are forest, darkness and the air in between is overflowing, and the rushing Wolverine flies past his shiny, shiny teeth.
My first boyfriend called me Batty or Bat or Tashy Bat, and like that was kind of me. So the bat's mouth, it was about kissing someone and imagining these miniature wolverines and bears and creatures living in the caves of each of our mouths, and how they kind of travel from one to the other, or stars move across. And it's a making out song really. And I loved that kind of fairy tale magical way to describe kissing someone. And then, the caves of our mouths are bears' bellies, and the air in between is spewing comets. And it was this like falling in love song. And the refrain, she is sure. I mean, it's about sex and kissing and all these things, but it's got such a childlike joy to like the feeling of falling in love as well. It's a really sensual, the lyrics are quite naughty in places and it's quite sensual, but I think this like really nice, we sort of, mix that with a really childlike abandon. And
Well, the whole she is sure sort of overloaded, it sounds like kids singing. And it reminds me, I think maybe I remember being a huge fan of Peach Plum Pear by Joanna Newsom.
Yeah, we did talk about
and
that.
it has this kind of choir of Joanna's singing on it that's spectacularly sort of distorting, and it sounds like a school concert badly recorded kind of thing, which we really loved.
Yeah.
And that's the She Is Sure definitely has that thing where we sort of were triumphant accidentally when it all sort of overloaded and had that quality. It was like, no, we're not redoing that. That's beautiful to
Yeah.
have that distortion on it. It's so good. There's a lot of accidents, but the kind of skill, I suppose, if there is one, is in sort of knowing which of
Which
those
ones are
accidents
good.
to leave in and sort of embrace. That was definitely one of them.
She is sure. She is sure. The caves of our mouths are bears, bellies and the air in between is spewing comets and the dancing central queen flies past, her tiny, tiny teeth. He's kind, she is free, and wants to show him.
Well, that one was definitely where Caroline and I ran up and down the garden whooping and stuff, and Abby was beautiful on that especially on the final part. But the strings on there are some of my favourite strings.
That one might be one of the best productions,
Yeah.
that we came up with.
Yeah, it took a
Because
while.
it's got such an amazing dynamic to it, and it's really moving as well. It's hard, it's not easy to make music that's emotionally impactful, and that one really feels like
It crescendos.
it crescendos, and it really hits a place towards the end where it's quite profoundly joyous as well, and that was what the whooping and the yelling, running around outside was all about. Like,
And the She
the
Is
most joyous
Sure,
sound is
backing
Yeah.
vocals were all peaking and blowing out, and it's like really
Yeah,
like
you
we
can
were
hear it overloading.
overloading it with joy, and we left that in.
But this was all recorded outside, running around, trying not to fall in the studio had a swimming pool in the garden, and trying not to fall in that, trying not to drop microphones into the water and get hit with costs, and it was just such an amazing evening. I remember asking for the engineers or the assistants to take the mics out and where to position them, and just hoping this was going to work out. But then watching the girls just running up and down and having such a brilliant time, it sounds like it. That whole episode makes such a difference to the final track, doesn't it? It's got something really
Jubilation.
quite precious, jubilation. It feels like a really precious part of the album. That song, I think that might be.
It's a good one.
I wouldn't necessarily put them in order of anything, but that if there was one, that feels like it's quite an important track.
She is sure. Find him in the bat's mouth. He is singing in her bat's mouth. He is shaking and dancing in her bat mouth. Getting tired and sleepy in her bat mouth. And she's holding him tight in her bat arms.
Still Jubilee and I Saw a Light was some of the earlier, the two kind of guitar ones I play on the record. Although actually we changed I Saw a Light from being a guitar track into a piano, because I actually used to play it on the guitar live. And both of them kind of started off really small and then kind of get quite big and grungy. And I remember in Still Jubilee, I think I was listening a lot to Nick Cave, and I was in Brighton living by the sea, and I've always had a big love of the sea and nautical or sea themes.
The seals they cried in Jubilee. The sharks they had along with me.
Did I play the guitar in the studio? Was that the original demo guitar that we then put through the amp?
No, we recorded
re-recorded
it really, really well. We recorded it on that posh vocal mic. I actually found a version of it maybe 6 months ago that was pristinely recorded, and it sounded amazing, but it didn't have anything like the sort of atmosphere that it has now. And it was an atmosphere track.
It also had it had that kind of, I was really into Air's Virgin Suicides soundtrack, and I love the echo on that vocal, the tape delay or whatever
I
it
listened
was.
to it today.
Yeah.
It sounds so good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's got
This kind of, I had a really shitty old Roland Space Echo that was permanently on the edge of not working, but it just held out long enough to get all these great sounds. And it was the same tape. It was a tape that had been in there since the 70s, never been changed. And I bought it secondhand off some guy that thought it was, the whole thing wasn't working at all, but I fixed the thing that wasn't working, and the tape just ran. It had this sort of crunchy quality, and you can hear that across the record.
And I'd been a fan of Steve Reich and like Wassily Basinski and all these funny tape loop guys, and it just, I loved it. It sounded like the tape had been buried underground for 50 years and we'd unearthed something, and that's what I
had that whole
wanted.
quality of like finding a tape in a skip, or finding an old 8-track cassette or something that was degraded, and definitely that sort of Alan Lomax, the Langley Schools thing, the sort of very cheap, those cassette machines where you had the sort of piano key transport controls. It had that sort of nostalgic quality to it, and it was there in this sort of 70s box. You just had to disregard all the good quality recording, and you just keep the tape bit and then readjust the timing so that it fits the timing of the original. And that was the sound. It was a sort of revelatory moment, really.
Birds they raised their young for dead, and ladies used feathery pillows for bed. Black snow came and black snow stayed, froze the ocean out of love.
There's one pertinent thing that I think is worth mentioning, because this is key to the record as well. Seal Jubilee has a part in it that was difficult to get, and I think we were determined to get it, and I made Natasha cry getting it because I was such a
The
fucking bully.
vibraphone, yeah.
The vibraphone, it was really hard. We weren't expert vibraphone players, or it was tough, but there was something about that dynamic of being unafraid to push and push and push and push, because we knew that the end result might be good. And I feel like that has coloured so much of the work I've done since, of that understanding that sometimes it's just really hard and you might be tired and you don't want to play the 58th take of the vibraphone. But
Also, I was
eventually,
just like, I don't know what I can do any different. Like, what do you want from me? Like when you're just playing it every which way you can think of, and it's like he's like less, more. I was just like, oh my, it's like torture. Because you're
That was
having
really
to
tough, but
rehearse a performance rather. I was very much of the thing of like, my feelings need to be raw and this just needs to come out how I feel it. And if I do something too many times, there's like this rebellious part of me that gets really upset because it feels overly thought or overly, like logical or something. And I remember getting so sad and feeling broken. And this was probably after a long, long day. But yeah, that was a low point over a vibraphone track. I mean, worse things have happened in people's lives. Like,
yeah.
Adopting Sarah's heart was never gonna be easy. With an angel tattoo sinking beneath her belt, Sarah.
yeah, we got a proper drummer in for that because Sarah had always been quite minimal live. One of my favourite parts of that is the backing vocals and the lyrics for the backing vocals. I just find them so funny, and I love the lyrics of this song in general. I'm sort of quite like surprised that I managed to write a song with these words in them, and that the backing vocals have like the tarmac of a melting motorway in there. I just find it so weird, and I don't know. There's just it's definitely a funny. It was named after the book by J.T. Leroy, Sarah, and it's about kind of swapping personas with somebody, and this, dark girl that kind of loses her faith in God.
Adopting Sarah's heart was never gonna be easy. Changing from black to blonde to black to blonde, Sarah. But on the dirty tarmac of a melting motorway, gave me her clothes and told me to take her place, Sarah, I want to be like you, Sarah.
I don't know. I just found it to be such a odd song. But then when we added the drums that sounded more live band, and there was a version with horns on it too, which I don't know if it came out or not, but we kind of played with that quite a lot, didn't we, David? I remember us not knowing exactly which direction it should go in, but we kind of pushed and pulled with it.
Yeah. But we sort of bonded over that whole sort of girl group thing. I think that became quite a big part of the sound of this record too. There's so many tracks that have got some element of that sort of 60s wall of sound, layered, slightly overloading backing vocals thing. And Sarah maybe I think that might have been one of the ones where we sort of discovered that for ourselves and sort of enjoyed it. I didn't know how to record a drum kit. I wasn't a drum kit engineer, but something about the shitness of that drum recording is really nice. I listened to it again the other day, and it's quite hard to make a drum sound quite as sort of papery and sort of unpro as that. But it's got that lovely naive quality again. I'm super proud of how bad that is and how it sort of got through it.
And we replaced I'd written that bass line on like a MIDI keyboard, and I remember getting real bass on that, and that was really fun to hear as well.
I think that was Ben's first
Was that Ben Christopher's
appearance in Back for Lash's Land, I think.
Okay.
I remember him doing that.
Yeah.
I think, because he didn't play masses on this record.
I think he did, bits of bass and guitar here and there, didn't he? Not very much.
Yeah, he came into the picture much later for albums 2 and 3 onwards and live stuff. But yeah, that was, again, sort of not really knowing what we were doing technically, but it just sounded cool.
I Saw a Light, and it's another really personal track for me. I mean, I suppose this album had been my whole life in the making, and I Saw a Light was sort of about dark things going on in suburbia. And one thing that's really beautiful about it is that David and I, we sat together and I wanted to make a sound collage at the beginning of the song. There's bits of talking, and there's a piece of piano that my godfather, who was Danny Thompson, musician Danny Thompson, bass player, he had recorded, I think I took him over a tape of me playing piano when I was 11, like all these songs that I'd written, compositions as a little girl, and he'd kept it and transferred it onto reel-to-reel tape for me. And when he knew I was making the album, he said, "Oh, watch your Tash, oh, you might want this, might come in handy," or whatever. And David and I listened to it, and it was all these really sweet, sad, melancholy, piano songs that tiny Natasha had written. And so in the collage at the beginning, we put some of that piano, and I remember describing to David that I wanted that collage to sound like it had been sucked up in a tornado, like in The Wizard of Oz. And we spent quite a while trying to make it woof around and pan around in this circular motion, and then get sucked into a box, and then there's just rain sounds, and then you get the piano coming in, and to me that was just prog like heaven. I was just like, this is so up my street. But it wasn't trying to be prog, it was trying to be cinematic. It was cinema. Like it was like seeing a film in my mind, and it was perfect, and it was midnight blue and lush green and gold and wet rainy roads and couples in cars and steamy windows and sad children sleepwalking. And it was all these, from the book that I showed David at the beginning, I just had lists of things: lightning, thunder, crackling radios, whale sounds, like creaky loft floorboards. And, you know, like I Saw a Light to me was this opportunity to, I don't know, it just encapsulated my child. It sounded like my childhood or something. And like I said, I'd initially written it on guitar, but when we came to do it, I think I'd switched over to the piano. And I love the sort of how it goes from the top of the keyboard to the very bottom. So you start with the kind of opening chords and then that really low dung 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 bass line. And as we'd been playing it live, we kind of talked about John Cale and the Velvet Underground, and Abby, you know, sort of got her John Cale drone on that built throughout the song, and then we had a big marching band bass drum that we'd hit on stage that kind of backed up the bass line of the piano.
I saw a light shining on a car, and a couple inside had committed suicide.
I guess when we started doing the track listing, there were certain ones that stood out, like Horse and I was definitely the opener, and then there was a natural rhythm, and when it clicked, it clicked. But I don't know, David, if you remember why I think we put I Saw a Light at the end because it was sort of that, you know, like the end credits kind of song. And I think all of my albums, there's sort of an end credits song.
Yeah, I don't remember there ever being any sort of question about that one not being the end.
Right.
In fact, I don't really remember any conversations about
Track listing.
ordering, other than it was so obvious that Horse and I was there and I Saw a Light was there. I don't think it was a difficult thing to do, but that song is so fully realised. If you were trying to sort of put into audio what the vision was in that first meeting, I don't know how we could have found a better sort of vehicle for it than all these found sounds, all this melody, all this drama, all this kind of disturbed suburbia. It's all in there, and it's with a good tune.
I wanted it to be like a alien abduction, E.T. kind of Twilight in suburbia horror song, and I'm really proud of that one. I love how it ends. It gets so big and dark, and you know, and I wasn't embarrassed to let it, you know, the couple committing suicide. I remember my cousin being like, God, that's a bit of a cheesy line. And I was like, I don't care. Like, I just, I don't know. It was dark and I wanted it to be almost on the nose in a way. And yeah, I really love that one.
And that vocal performance at the end, that was the thing in that very first meeting I had, where that was the moment. I think I told you this the other day, didn't I? When I heard that demo and you sang it like that sort of bellowing at the end. And I had a sort of full body sort of goosebump moment thinking, I have to work on this record. This is something I really want to happen. It was that vocal moment in the I Saw a Light demo. So to hear that sort of fully complete, realised, delivered and succeed in sort of sounding like it was supposed to, it was thrilling. Yeah, definitely. When we were finishing that, I knew this was as good a record as I'd ever worked on or was likely to get to work on.
Death in your eyes, death in your eyes. I saw a light.
I remember my terror because I overloaded that final mix. I put it through a box and I didn't realize until mastering that I fucked up. And the fuck up is on the final master of every single track. That the center is distorted. But maybe there's something good about that even. I remember the mastering engineer saying, "Do you realize what you've done?" And he was quite
Demeaning.
yeah, basically he was quite demeaning. But that's Fur and Gold by Bat for Lashes has a massive sort of overload issue, but that's okay. It's part of the sound of it. So that I was terrified basically that I needed to redo everything, but it was fine.
I remember going to do the artwork after we'd finished the record, and I went back to my childhood home, and me standing in front of a suburban house with my horse and my gold headband and everything was in front of my first love, my first boyfriend I had from 16 to 25. It was in front of his parents' house, and they'd kind of taken me in times of need. And it was just this full circle moment of seeing like this twilight blue, this young woman on the front cover, like with her horse about to embark on the journey of a lifetime, something I'd only ever dreamt about up until that point. And the fact that it married so well with them, it looked like the music sounded. And I had this thing in my hand, this vinyl, and I just remember being like gobsmacked that it had come into physical reality. And from start to finish, I just always remember just feeling so surprised by it. It's like I went into some subterranean or some celestial, I don't know what it was, but I'd gone into some dream world and came out with this thing in my hand.
As the night turned to day, I saw a light getting smaller in the distance, and I said goodbye.
I knew from demo one, when I heard that first demo, I knew that this potentially was not only a really good record, but quite potentially an important one that could really touch a lot of people. And 20 years on, I feel intensely proud of having just been part of this music, because I think it's really good. I feel distanced enough from it to be able to just enjoy it as a listener. And I think I know it's about as good a record as I've ever got to work on and be part of. So it's a beautiful piece of work, I think, and I'm super proud to have been part of it.
So we've been talking about my first album, Fur and Gold, and 20 years later, kind of reflecting on it and remembering it and enjoying talking with David, about all the processes and the production and the writing. It's really nice to go back and look at something, having lived my life and sort of, the beginning of this musical journey. And looking back now, I think it's such a realised piece of work, because often the first album is your whole life up until that point. But I feel really, as a mother now, I look back on myself then and I feel like really proud and like protective and proud and kind of like, you did it. I don't know, it's a nice feeling 20 years later.
Visit lifeoftherecord.com for more information about Bat for Lashes. You'll also find a full transcript of this episode and a link to purchase Fur and Gold, including the recent deluxe edition. Instrumental music by North Home. Thanks for listening.